Hi, in this video I want to show you how to override a property of a base class. Okay, we have seen how to override the constructor. We have seen how to override the methods. Now we are going to see how to override a property. So you might wonder, like, why would you need to do that? So here's an example, week 6 demo. We were writing a person class and a student class. So the person class is the base class, student class derives from a person. We didn't focus too much on the validation because we wanted to get through the constructors and the methods. So let's look at some of the properties of the person class. We have first name, last name, date of birth, social security, email and phone number. We could have validation for all of these, right? Let's take one particular field, date of birth. A person can have any date of birth, right? There's really no restriction. The only reason we would add validation to that is to make sure that that person does not have like a future date. That's the only validation I can think of. But think about a student. A student, you can have like a 5-year-old going to college. Usually, it may be an exception, but usually a 5-year-old won't go to college. So you could have validation there saying the student has to be at least 18 years of age. Well, this is only for today's situation. You can argue that students can be much younger than 18 years of age. CCP students are like that. They go to college and also take classes, right? So those are like a small number. Usually the age for college is 18. So usually the age is 18. So we could have validation. Okay, we could have validation here saying that this particular date of birth has to be 18. But remember, this validation should not apply for a person, but it should only apply for a student. That is why we cannot put that validation inside the person class. Then it will say every human being has to be 18 years of age, which is ridiculous. Okay, so in order for us to override that, first step is we have to make this as a virtual property. Okay. Then you go into student class and here we are going to override that property. Okay, here. So here everything is the same. The only thing that we are in trouble with is using date of birth. Using that property name, we cannot use it here. We have to use the actual property name of the base class. Okay, I'll show you how to do that. So get and then set. Let's see what happens here. I just want to see what happens if we do this. Okay, we get a ton of errors, right? So there's a reason why we are getting a ton of errors. It's because we are calling date of birth inside date of birth. Okay, so instead what we are doing is we are saying do the validation from the base class. Okay, so you have to say base.date of birth and here you can say base.date of birth. So now you can see there is no error because, so it's like a circular reference, right? Here is the property. You just cannot be like directly referencing to the property inside the property. So you are saying here, hey, remember that date of birth from my base class, I want to use it. So that's why you say base.date of birth. Okay, now we have not added any validation, which we should be adding. We don't want to like assign this value all the time. If only the value that we get meets our 18-year-old criteria. And let's, for simplicity's sake, just take the year. Okay, if value dot year minus today's date, right? Date time dot now, not now, today dot year. Okay, if you subtract these two, let's calculate, that's the age, right? So let's say here int age equal to that. If age greater than or equal to 18, we want to do this. Otherwise, we want to write an error and we don't want to set any data. No, not date of birth, age. Okay, we want to only validate and set the value when the age is greater than 18. Okay, so now here is the student number 1. I have changed this to 2020, which should error out. Okay, so now let's run this code. So see here, date of birth cannot be under 18. So our validation kicked off. When the age is valid, like another student, I think, let's see. There is student number 2. Okay, so there seems to be a problem, a small problem. See, for the second student also, I am getting the same message. So when I look at this code, when you face a problem like this, I would just write this step to find why it is not working. Okay, now this age, let's see what happens to the student. So first student age is 0 because 2020 I gave as the date of birth year. Second student age is minus 31. What does that tell me? These two have to be flipped. Yeah. So I have to take today's date minus date of birth. I did it the other way, and that's the problem. Now let's run the code. So first student age is 0. So we get the message age cannot be under 31. Second student age is 31 and we never get that message should be under 18. Okay, so this is how we override. So override procedure is the same. Okay, if you see all of them, the procedure is the same. Like for example here, in intro, if you want to call the base class as intro, you say base.intro. Similarly, inside the property, when you want to access the base class as date of birth property, you say base.date of birth. Okay, and this usually is only required inside a property. Property is calling a property. Okay, anywhere else you use date of birth. If you were to use date of birth here, you can just say date of birth because that will call this property, and this property is going to call the base property anyways. Okay, so this is how you override your base class information. Okay, so that is what I wanted to cover today. Your final project will have an example like this that you have to implement. So make sure that you get the concept right. Everything is the same. Only when you use the variable name, you have to use the property name instead of the individual variable name, and you have to say base dot whenever you're calling the base property. That's all. That's the only change. Everything else is just for demonstration purpose. I hope you find this video useful. Thanks.